Slowly, I left Sugar Cube Corner and made my way to Twilight Sparkle's library. In the advent of night, the evening hung over my horn in a deep purple blanket. All around me, bodies of equines swiftly galloped their way home. I can never understand why so many ponies are in such a hurry when the sun sets, especially in Ponyville. I sometimes wonder if I'm the only pony who does this, taking her time and allowing the cool and crisp murmur of the falling evening to lull her into submission. I gave in to the moment with a soft hum, reciting a piano number that my mother had taught me when I was a little foal. My family had been better off than Derpy and Dinky. I don't think I ever once imagined that I could have lost all that I had, both emotionally and materially. I still wonder what my family is up to now, but I try not to. Thinking about the piano melody carries with it all of the warm memories of the past. I wish I could say that the present was any less cold. The lampposts in the streets of Ponyville were being lit by the time I reached the door to Twilight's library. It was open. Twilight's assistants must have been carrying something in. As soon as I stepped inside, I realized I was correct. Spike went back and forth, trucking several parcels of antique books which had been mailed from Canterlot. He looked my way and waved cheerfully. "Hi there!" He walked by, carrying a package toward the opposite end of the room. "That hoodie is just swell." Thanks," I said. "Is Miss Sparkle around?" "Do you have an appointment or something?" "Spike!" Just then, the lavender unicorn in question marched into the front foyer from the adjacent hallway. "Did you open the package yet that contains all 8 volumes of Heroes in Equestrian Literature?" She stopped and let out a slight gasp when she saw me. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know some pony was there." She blinked wide and then smiled, little dimples showing. "Can I help you?" "Have I mentioned that Twilight Sparkle is really adorable?" "As a matter of fact, you can." "I see. Well, I'll do my best. But it's only fair to tell you that the library's closing soon and I have an important letter to write to Princess Celestia." I nodded. "I know." "Well, hey there." Spike walked by once again. "Digging the swell hoodie?" "Yeah, I bet you do." I turned to face Twilight once more, smiling. "Trust me, Miss Sparkle, I think you'll be intrigued by what I have to share with you. And then I'd like to ask your help with something." "Oh?" "I promise you won't be tardy with sending any letter to the princess." "Tardy?" Twilight Sparkle's teeth showed and she let loose a little nervous laugh. "Who's afraid of being tardy?" Indeed, I trotted over to a little wooden seat and plopped myself down, reaching into my saddlebag. Glancing up at her, I murmured, "Miss Sparkle, have you ever had a beautiful melody stuck in your head, but you don't know where it came from or what it's supposed to mean, only that you have this natural urge to say, hum it, regardless?" Twilight Sparkle squinted curiously at me. Her eyes were crooked, that undeniable look of confusion. I could write books about that expression on the face of every pony I meet, practically. Then again, that's what I'm doing right now, I guess. I chuckled, pulling my lyre out of the bag, and I held it before me. Gazing softly at Twilight, I spoke. "My name is Lyra Heartstrings, and you won't remember me. You won't remember this conversation, just like with every pony else I've ever met. Everything I do or say is going to be forgotten. Every letter I've written will appear as blank. Every piece of evidence I've left behind will end up missing. I'm stuck here in Ponyville because of the same curse that has made me so forgettable. Still, that doesn't stop me from doing one thing I love. If my melodies find their way into your heart, then there's still hope for me. If I can't prove that I exist, I can at least prove my love for each and every one of you. Please, for me, listen to my story, this symphony." Twilight Sparkle blinked rapidly. She ran a hoof across her forehead and shook it before processing her words past a wincing expression. "What do you mean? I don't get it. Is this some kind of—" "Shh." I smiled and I floated the lyre in front of me. "Just listen." I closed my eyes and concentrated. Telekinetically, strumming each string in succession. All of my instrumentals in the heart of downtown Ponyville that afternoon were only rehearsals. There, before twilight, in that acoustic heart of her wooden home, I performed Lunar Elegy No. 7 as sweetly and eloquently as I ever could. I didn't know the ending. I danced my way through the chords with no less confidence. When the performance was over, I reopened my eyes to see Twilight sitting before me. Her face was aglow with the melody of the song still echoing in that gifted mind of hers. "That," Twilight Sparkle began to murmur, that was—" "Tell me," I uttered encouragingly, with my gaze becoming piercing for a moment. "Is it familiar?" It is!" she exclaimed. "I feel as though I've heard it from—" I leaned forward, heart beating. I did all I could to keep my composure. Finally, Twilight Sparkle stammered. The Lunar Archives! Yes! I believe that's a symphony from the early neoclassical era." She beamed as the information blossomed in her mind, as if unfolded from a hitherto unkept part of her mental library. "Princess Celestia shared it with me once before the return of Nightmare Moon. She told me that it was one of few things she had to remember her sister by, before Princess Luna was tainted by the spirit that turned her malevolent." "So tell me, Miss Sparkle, do you know how it ends?" "The ending to what you just performed?" "Yeah." It wasn't finished?" "No, but you've heard it before. Don't you know how it ends?" I don't understand what this is about." Twilight gazed sideways at me, her brow furrowed beneath those violet bangs. I've heard the tune before, but that's because Princess Celestia pulled it out of the Lunar Archives and shared it with me. How do you know about it?" "Because I hear it," I murmured. "When I'm sleeping, or awake, or when I close my eyes, or when I open them, I hear this tune and many more like it bouncing across the walls of my mind and resonating through the ley lines connected to my consciousness, as if my own horn was picking up something beyond the frequency of the living in an attempt to tell me something, and tell me alone." It was dramatic, but the truth as far as I could tell. But how? Why?" "For the same reason that you don't hear it, I suspect." I took a deep breath and said, "For the same reason that no pony will ever remember that they've even spoken to me. To them, the tune is forgettable as I am." "Uh-huh." Twilight Sparkle slumped to her haunches and blinked hard. "Miss Heartstrings, I don't understand. What do you mean that you're forgetful?" I smiled. Spike walked by again. I whistled at him. "Hey, Mr. Greenspines." "Hey there," he said, standing before the last parcel. "I'm digging that swell hoodie." "Yes, we know, Spike." Twilight Sparkle frowned at him. "Haven't you said that enough to our guest?" "Our guest?" Spike made a face, his gaze crooked, bouncing back and forth between Twilight and myself. "I'm sorry, Twilight. I was away this whole time unpacking, remember?" Before Twilight's voice could say something to match that flabbergasted expression, I spoke up. "Spike, do me a favor if you could. I'd like to check out Zoology of Zebrahara by Jockey Goodall. Would you mind grabbing it for me while I have a chat with Twilight here?" "It's sure thing. Zoology of Zebrahara coming right up." The eager young assistant bounded down a distant hallway. Twilight scratched her head with an errant hoof. "Why the sudden interest in Goodall's writing?" "I could care less about the nature of that book," I said. "I just happen to know that you shelve it at the furthest possible part of the library from here." "And how could you know that? This is the first time you visited the library or at least since I came here and became the chief librarian." "As a matter of fact, I have come to visit this library. Lots of times." I smiled steadily. "And they were all after you came to Ponyville, Twilight." "But I don't—" "As a matter of fact, I arrived in Ponyville not long after you did, Miss Sparkle." The next part was a little hard. I've always had a hard time keeping my composure here, but I think I'm getting better at it. "I used to live in Canterlot just like you, and my parents and I lived in the Upper Alabaster district, on Starswirl Street." "Starswirl Street?" Twilight's ears twitched and her eyes lit up. "That was 2 streets down from where I used to live." 484 Nebula Avenue. Your apartment flat was just above Moondancer's." Twilight couldn't help it. She let loose that same awkward giggle I'd heard hundreds of times. "That's uncanny. You mean to say you know Moondancer, too?" "Yeah. We were full hood friends. The two of you? How come she never told me? No, Twilight, I said. I meant the three of us, you, Moondancer, and I. We attended magic kindergarten together, and the rest is history. She stared at me, eyes narrowing, mouth agape. But that's... She gulped and then shook her head. I would have remembered. Moondancer and I... We went to magic summer camp together for years. One summer when you were only 7, you tried a teleportation spell and got yourself stuck atop a royal guard tower. And it took the entire afternoon for us to flag down a Pegasus to give you a lift back down to the street. And you were so embarrassed you cried. So Moondancer and I took you to the local donut cafe, and we made you feel better. That's when you finally told us about your acceptance into Celestia's School for Gifted Unicorns. You had kept it a secret from us for so long because you were afraid we'd become jealous and not want to be your friend anymore. That couldn't have been further from the truth. We loved and cherished every moment we had with you. Years later, when Moondancer and I were also accepted into the school, you showed us around the campus. Our first year in class went off without a hitch, unlike so many other new students, and we always had you to thank for that. Twilight listened to all of my words, and when I was done, she gazed toward the far end of the room and muttered quietly, I remember all of those moments, but it was only Moondancer and myself every time. I don't remember you at all, Miss Heartstrings. She gazed up briefly and bore a frown. How do I know this isn't some sort of stupid prank? Did Rainbow Dash set you up for this? You mean like the time she and Pinkie Pie switched your writing jar with invisible ink? I said with a smirk. Or the time Rainbow Dash doused Jermaine with a hidden bucket full of ketchup, and then you trotted off to the bathroom, only to find the tub filled with packages of frozen curly fries? I chuckled, and then took a breath. Or what about the time she convinced you that your horn was falling off, and, like a true hypochondriac, you spent the entire night reading up on unicorn ailments and fell asleep in the middle of the library? I do recall her treating you to lunch at Sugar Cube Corner to make up for the last one. How could you know all about that? Because you've told me about it, Twilight. You mean to tell me that we've talked before? Dozens of times, I said, though it came off making me sound a bit blasé. It's tough trying to inflect one's words when they've been repeated so many countless times. I did my best to try to stay pleasant and approachable. You're a highly intelligent unicorn, Twilight. I've known that since we were foals. I'm glad to see you becoming a shining member of the community here in Ponyville. But just like every other conversation that we've ever had, you won't remember it any more than all of the rest. That's too crazy to believe. A young voice from the side spoke up. Twilight? Twilight looked over.